Okay, I think we're finally good to go. A little bit of a late start, apologies for anyone who was waiting, but for today, we're going to be playing a single, or actually casting, a single build tournament, going over the many builds for our players. So to start off, it's going to be Ice Power versus Killerinu. And yeah, it should be a good day. We're starting a little bit late, so just a tiny bit frazzled, but we got there. You can see the bracket in front of you. And to start off, it's actually going to be a Dark Elf versus Wood Elf game. So there's no stream sniping that can really happen here because the players have their yeah, they have all of their builds open for each other because it is a single build tournament. For the build of Killerinu, you can see it over here. It's going to be a pretty standard build of Wood Elf. Looks like a Deep Wood Scout kite by the looks of it. So it should be quite exciting. There's the Sisters of Twilight too, so all pretty good. I see Human Boys in chat, Bowmore too. Showing off the full Cathay roster, indeed. So that's gonna be pretty exciting, but that's not what I'll be going over today. Instead, it's going to be a nice few matches here in ye old tournament. All right, just checking to make sure that nothing is burning down. Indeed, it isn't. So, starting off with our players today, it is going to be the forces of Ice Power against the forces of Killerinu. Go ahead and set that now, Killerinu. There we go. I believe it's spelled correctly. And we may begin. Samurai Warrior in chat. Hello. Welcome. Now, generally, this is thought of as a pretty bad matchup for the Dark Elves, but the nature of the single build tournament is that you can't bring the typical counters that you would usually expect. So, as you can see here, that is the army of Killerinu. It looks pretty good, but it doesn't have a lot of the Waywatcher punching power that usually you would expect against the Dark Elves. For Ice Power, it is actually a fairly standard build, and actually not too far off what he would usually bring against the Wood Elves. Got a lot of cavalry here, lots of Dark Riders, the Morathi Manticore squad, and a ton of Scourge Runner chariots. Samurai Warrior saying, you believe this is 50-50 lately, don't know why. I personally think it's a lot of the Dark Elf players sort of catching up in the meta and really practicing this matchup. Now for the forces of the Wood Elves, we do see there are a ton of Deepwood Scouts, and I would expect them to do quite well against the Dark Elves. They don't have a ton of armor, but they won't be nearly as effective against the Scourge Runner chariots. The Zotes too probably won't be doing a whole ton this battle, but overall there is a lot of anti-cavalry here that I think will generally go well for the Wood Elves, at least defending their backlines. Morathi doesn't have too many options in the form of magic damage, so it's really going to be the Soul Stealers that punish these Stag Knights. So, a few volleys do shoot out towards the Scourge Runner chariots. Oh, and Red Wedding Planner in chat too, actually the one that sponsored this tournament and gave the idea for it. So if you enjoy, do give thanks to our glorious Wedding Planner in chat. Now, the Sisters of Twilight, though, unlike the Deepwood Scouts, are going to be getting a lot more damage on the chariots and the manticores too, by the looks of it, but she's going to be taking a bit of damage herself. She does have the healing ability on her, and that will be allowing her to take a little bit more damage than you might expect this game. It can get a little bit dicey though, since she will eventually run out of she might just rout off the battlefield before her healing procs. As for the Sylvan Knights, they're playing very aggressively, but they don't have too much to worry about. Still a very inefficient trade for the Wood Elves, since the Deepwood Scouts were firing at a different target while the Sylvan Knights were engaged. You can see they've lost about 1,000 gold worth of value. They're going to need a little bit of healing to actually get patched up, but As I say that, a huge Deepwood Scout volley does land and get in a lot of damage on the Dark Elf Cavalry and the Manticore, actually, mostly. And a second volley does drop, taking out that Manticore quite swiftly. It's going to be actually shattered off the battlefield now, and that's going to be a pretty nice win for the Wood Elves. But a potentially large play here, though. Ice Power going in for the deep dive into the Wood Elf backline. The Deepwood Scouts are firing away, but actually not getting a whole ton of hits in. And it's going to be up to the Wood Elf Cavalry and Infantry to hold here. The Spears, if I can hover over them, well, anyways, the Spears do manage to break off those Dark Riders, but the Chariots are still going to be a bit of a problem. Strangely enough, though, the Zotes coming on in to support actually a really nice counter to the Chariots in this particular moment. Gonna be actually breaking them off almost immediately. The Dark Riders do move on in, though. Another unit slamming into the Deepwood Scouts, getting in a good amount of damage. Sylvan Knights look like they want to be moving into support. They do slam into the backs of the Dark Riders, and it looks like it's going to be a swift terror out here for them, which is really bad for the Dark Elves. They are getting more and more engagements, though, so the chances that they'll be able to actually overrun the Wood Elf forces gets more and more likely by the moment. Their infantry is getting engaged now bogging down the Eternal Guard for the High Elves. But is there any mobility left to really shut down these Deepwood Scouts? There are Dark Riders in the back, they have rallied, but Spears have moved in to actually intercept them. Meanwhile, on the left flank, Sisters of Twilight and the Sylvan Knights pushing back these Chariots. And I don't know if the Dark Elves are gonna have what it takes to win out this battle. Marathi is still doing really well, though, but surprisingly enough, the ROR Zotes have actually been able to perform really well here in the defense. I don't even know what their name is. The Enigmas of Gyron. Wow, okay, I've never heard that one before, but they're going to be pretty scary for sure. Now, a Doombolt does drop on the Sylvan Knights. Gets decent damage, not particularly high, though. Not what Ice Power wants to be getting for sure. And these Dark Riders are choosing not to engage these Deepwood Scouts just yet. Potentially a flub from Ice Power, but even if they were to move in, they would very likely get shot down. Another Soul Stealer does drop. It looks like the Sylvan Knights will be routing off, which is definitely a very big win for Ice Power, but can he pull it together with just 2 Chariots, Marathi, and a couple units of infantry? He does have these Dark Riders now engaging, though. Deepwood Scouts a tiny bit exposed. It looks like they won't be able to fire in a volley to ward them off just yet. And Killerinu getting his Deepwood Scouts compromised again, this time a little bit harder, and it seems like he's going to be punished pretty hard for it. These Deepwood Scouts are going to be finished off by the Dark Riders, and these ones over here are now getting chased down quite handily by the Dread Spears. However, a small win for the Wood Elves. The Sylvan Knights do rally, and they're going to be chasing down these Dark Riders. Looks like they do manage to push them back, but a nice swap out here. The other Dark Riders coming on in, but it looks like the Sylvan Knights still get their charge in and will be getting in a decent amount of damage. Marathi looking to possibly throw down another Soul Stealer. That would be pretty good for the Dark Elves, and actually the balance of power is creeping back in their favor with those recent plays. Particularly picking off this unit of Deepwood Scouts really hurts the overall range damage that the Wood Elves have. And it makes it harder for them to finish off Marathi in the late game. There we go, another Soul Stealer does drop 2. We are only at the 5-minute mark, so we could expect another 2 Soul Stealers in the next 5 minutes, as is the testing in my video you can check out on my channel. But shameless plugging aside, you can see that's going to be swinging the balance of power very much so in the favor of the Dark Elves, as they are able to constantly slowly poke away at the Wood Elf anti-cavalry forces. But all of that balance of power is mostly in Marathi. She does still run the risk of getting sniped, but the ammunition is running pretty low for the Wood Elves now. They only have 1 unit of Zotes and a very beat up unit of Sylvan Knights, brought down only to 2 models. So it's gonna be pretty hard to snipe out Marathi, but she's moving in pretty aggressively. Looks like a volley doesn't target her down. Killerinu knowing that Ice Power will likely be dodging it. and instead routing off another unit of Scourge Runner chariots. So there is only one unit of chariots left. The infantry is not that scary for the Wood Elves, the Dark Elf infantry, but in the late game situation, this infantry, since there are so many spears, they will likely be able to finish off a unit like the Sisters of Twilight. And honestly, I'm not sure if the Wood Elves have what it takes to finish off the rest of the Dark Elf infantry. Marathi does land in the Zotes, but actually manages to get a good amount of cycle charging in. And the Zotes are going to have to use a regrowth on themselves to try and patch themselves up. Or perhaps that's from the Spellsinger of Life. Marathi cycle charging again, though. Looks like she will be trying to snipe out a Zote. A little bit risky, though, since a Deepwood Scout volley could end her rightly. But it looks like she will be able to take back into the air. A volley does fire off, shoots at the chariots, but doesn't get a lot of damage. And I think the Dark Elves have done it, despite a pretty bad balance of power deficit at the start. They did weather the storm, and the Deepwood Scouts are finally out of ammunition. It doesn't look like there's a ton of options for the Wood Elves to come back, but Killer Inu, perhaps feeling like there is still a chance, sticking in the battle, the Sisters of Twilight heal could possibly swing things around the other way. Not to mention the Deepwood Scouts, they have decent combat stats, 18 and 22 compared to the 34 and 52 of the Spears. The Deepwood Scouts are definitely going to be losing that fight. So it's all going to be on the Sisters of Twilight. A nice Doombolt dodge does keep these Deepwood Scouts fairly healthy, and the Sisters of Twilight look like they might be moving in for an engagement. But no, actually disengaging, and Marathi is now on the chase. If she lands even a couple attacks on the Sisters of Twilight, that's going to be really rough for them. But while they distract, the Zotes are clearing up the rest of the Dark Elf cavalry. It looks like they might be swinging around too to actually slam into the chariots, but the infantry for the Wood Elves is now gone. It is just some really battered Zotes and a single Spellsinger of Life left on the ground, and even a Manticore in the late game coming back to potentially snipe out this caster. Killerino gives the GG, and Ice Power will be winning it. He thought it was pronounced Killer Inu. It may very well be Killer Inu instead of Killerinu. That makes sense. But I might not be able to switch how I say it. Nevertheless, the final Soul Stealer does drop Ice Power, slamming out those Soul Stealers quite frequently, and the Wood Elves are going to be losing it. Now there we go. The Sylvan Knights did do pretty well. The Zotes actually underperforming here, as they are not great against the constant shots and Soul Stealers. Although they did tank a lot, definitely not great in this particular matchup. Pronounce Skaven Inu? Sure, I'll do it. But he's out of the tournament. I don't have to say his name anymore. So we will be moving on. GG's or GG. And we'll see if we can find another lobby. I think the next one is going to be No Cane, No Gain against Ice Power. So I'll see if I can actually load up that army list. Here we go. You can see it right there in the bottom right corner. I included my wonderful picture for some reason. And we'll see how this goes. Okay, you can invite your next opponent. There we go. Meanwhile, the bracket is progressing smoothly. It looks like Zyphos getting taken out by Human Boy in the first round, losing against Skaven. Whoa, you can see over here. Yeah, Human Boy progressing up in the tournament. Glorious Feeder has defeated Energized. Now, and that's going to be our 2 quarterfinalists. We will see who, or actually no, semifinalists, and we'll see who moves in to meet them. Hey, Zachary, Skaven best faction. I'm sure many people would agree and disagree with that sentiment. But all right, let's go ahead and change the names too. Well, let's see. It's gonna be ice power against no gain, no gain. There we go. I'm always afraid I'm gonna spell Kane wrong, but we got there. We got there. Ice power versus human boy. Yes, yes, in the finals. Ooh, that'd be interesting. Enticity best faction, asks Zachary. Well, oh hey, Killer Inu. Now, is it Killer Inu or is it Killer Inu? Because I may or may not have been saying it wrong. But yeah, the best faction right now, it really depends. Maybe I'll do a tier list, Zachary. Perhaps I will do a tier list on it. Let's see. You would think Greenskins and Empire could be good. They have a little bit of everything. It's sort of strange. A lot of the specialized factions are actually much better in this tournament because they can't get hard countered as much. Red Wedding Planner saying before this started, what would I say is the main power factions and style for armies people should bring here? I think overall, I think dwarves are actually pretty dominant in this format. Specifically, like I said earlier, they do not get countered very much by many. Well, just in general, they don't get countered very hard in this format of tournament because they have very specific types of counters. So, you need a lot of armor piercing. You have to bring very niche style of builds, and because of that, dwarves generally dominate pretty hard. There are a couple other good, very niche factions that will do well. And overall, you can play a lot of generalist factions too. For example, the Wood Elves can do really well. Dark Elves with a really nice generalist army are nice. Let's see who's Ice Power up against. He's up against No Gain, No Gain. There we go. But yeah, there are a bunch of generalist factions, but overall, a lot of armies that you would expect to do well, like the Empire, don't have as strong of a generalist army as you might expect. Actually, the Dark Elves can perform a lot better in that situation than the Empire. Oh man, now Ice Power is going up against double Wood Elves. Now, in this case, it's going to be a Wood Elf cavalry sort of kite with a lot of elite infantry. We'll see how well that does against Ice Power's build. I don't know how well it will do against Marathi and the two Manticores, but we will see. What am I drinking? Maple syrup? How do you know me so well, Hammond? Yes, it is 100% maple syrup in the cup. Man, that would end you instantly. I feel like one sip of that and you're just done for. But as is the Canadian tradition, it is a trial by combat to finally prove that you have moved on to adulthood. It is to finish a whole jug of maple syrup. Let's see, Thomas Ramford saying, "Is it killer in you?" Let's see. Yeah, we haven't actually gotten the answer yet from Killer Inu, so I'll just keep mixing it up until we get there. Anticities. Let's see. Oh yeah, well, dwarves isn't really my faction nowadays, but yeah, for this type of tournament, dwarves are pretty good. Someone saying Skaven is actually coming in with the Skaven favoritism for the top faction in the tournament. I think Skaven are pretty good. You're thinking Dowian, maybe counts. Ooh, vampire counts. Now, they're a bit of a strange thing because vampire counts rely a lot on specific tools to beat different factions. But if they're expecting a lot of generalist factions, they could be pretty scary. Must go and buy them. Make them eat food. Are you talking about Skaven? They do have a lot of DLCs. Oh yes, yes, for sure, red wedding planter. It is you know, in every Canadian's backyard there is a tree that is just constantly spilling out maple syrup. Let's see. Cool, cool. All right. Someone's talking about a hot dog stream. I feel like that would be that would be bad for me. I am clearly not a person that can eat a lot of food, so also probably a bad idea. But it looks like both players are ready. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. The map is going to be the chill flow. It is a quite sizable map for the players. I am excited to see how it goes. Now, we've already seen the build of Ice Power, but what will we see for No Cane, No Gain? Maple syrup hot dogs actually unironically sounds not too bad. But maybe I'd regret it if I tried it out myself. Now, on the red side, No Cane, No Gain coming in to contest the winner of the last round, Ice Power. Gonna be coming in with a much more elite infantry build than the last Wood Elf army. Orion coming in to avenge the Sisters of Twilight, supported by a Branch Wraith that has healing and pendulum and a slow. A healthy amount of cavalry, wild riders in this case, and some glade riders to help skirmish shoot. Let's not forget the single unit of Way Watchers to poke away at any armored targets, and a unit of Deepwood Scouts, quite formidable indeed. And for the forces of Ice Power, again, we are seeing the Morathi Double Manticore Squad, Scourge Runner Chariots on the ground, Cold One Knights, and some cavalry. Yes, Human Boy, you are supposed to wait for me. The bracket says to wait for the caster. This is going to be a really short tournament today, so I will be holding up my players this time around. Now, what are we going to be seeing here? The deployments looking pretty standard. Same deployment for Ice Power. He's leading with the Scourge Runner Chariots since they want to be poking away early, and the Skirmishers of the Wood Elves are also leading. Both sides are not particularly worried about getting full Vanguard rushed because they know exactly what their opponents are bringing. So pretty expected for both players, but we'll see who actually manages to come out on top. The Wood Elves have a lot of large targets for the Scourge Runner Chariots to pick off. So No Cane, No Gain is going to have to worry a tiny bit about that. Contende, you're saying he had a really nice match between Eltharion. That's pretty exciting. It's too bad we were not able to catch it, unfortunately. But as the battle starts, Ice Power is going to be moving on up with his skirmishers, poking away at the Glade Riders. Very hard to dodge those Scourge Runner shots. The Glade Riders, they do get a few volleys off, but another volley comes on in. Oh my goodness. And 7 Glade Riders are already down. That's a very rough trade, but Orion punishing those Scourge Runner Chariots, slamming them into half HP with his javelins, actually making up for the loss of the Glade Riders, but you actually have to be killing the Chariots if you want to reduce their value. He is tanking many of their shots though. It's going to be helping the Wood Elves quite a bit. The Wild Riders, a little bit exposed. They might take a few hits from the Scourge Runners, and meanwhile the Glade Riders on the flank continuing to fare pretty badly here. Another 2 models do go down. That's going to be pretty nice for Ice Power. Overall, he's weakened the Wood Elf kiting strength quite a bit, and even killed off a couple models of cavalry. Meanwhile, Orion still trading out quite well, and a nice play from the Wood Elves, moving up with the Glade Riders here on the left flank to begin punishing the infantry. Still though, the Chariots are going to be quite an issue, but since they are a little bit more beat down, I would expect the elite Wood Elf infantry to perform a little bit better in this battle. Double hit bug on the Chariots doing work. Oh, you're talking about Orion? Perhaps, but I don't know if his javelins have been double hitting them. A few of them seem to be doing normal damage. Some nice dodges from Orion too, making sure he doesn't take too much damage. And the Wild Riders are committing to an engagement. They are taking a ton of shots on the charge though, and that's going to be a really rough trade for the Wood Elves. You can see the balance of power actually pretty even on both sides, but with the loss of this cavalry is going to be pretty brutal indeed. The war dancers do move on up, and it looks like they want to be supporting the wild riders, who will be continuing to chase the chariots, but will they be getting kited out here? If you take a look at the speed, wild riders at 85, chariots at 84. The wild riders will just barely be catching up, but they decide to disengage again, since overall they would be taking a hit from the dark riders and actually getting pretty beat up in that situation. Overall, pretty bad for the wood elves, losing a very elite unit of cavalry, but meanwhile in the center line fight, things are going a little bit better for them. These wild riders get a nice charge onto these bleak swords, staying in combat to use their charge bonus and chunking them down to half HP almost immediately. But the dark riders do charge in, they counter charge the wild riders, and the wild riders will be taking quite a bit of damage in return. Meanwhile, on the flank, the chariots do charge in. They are a bit stuck in combat, but it looks like they managed to trade well. I think I heard a soul stealer go down, but I don't see it. Perhaps dropping somewhere on the wild riders, I'm not too sure. But overall, the wood elves are having a pretty bad time. A pendulum will be dropping, punishing those dread spears a tiny bit, but it procs the murderous prowess. The dread spears will be routing nonetheless, but the murderous prowess is going to be pretty scary indeed. Some Searing Doom drops on the Cold One Knights, getting in some pretty good damage. Cold One Dread Knights, that is, but a pretty vicious Soul Stealer does drop. It's going to be hitting Orion, going to be hitting his supporting infantry, but it looks like Ice Power decides to cancel that cast instead, since it definitely wouldn't have been too worth only hitting a single unit. Going to be pretty nice for him, but perhaps it doesn't even matter if he casts that Soul Stealer, since he does have a pretty nice lead in this battle. Scourge Runner chariots are now running over the Way Watchers. They won't be getting too much damage anymore, and a Doom Bolt will be dropping on the unit of Eternal Guard. They are clumped up, so we'll probably get some pretty good damage. There we go, good few hundred points of damage there, and while Orion is quite a beast, I don't think he will be able to win the game this time around. Actually, now quite low on HP. His a Scroll of Shielding has dropped on top of him, but he hasn't had his other damage resist buff triggered just yet. Or maybe it has. Actually, I feel like it would have, but perhaps not. He's now getting extremely low on HP. A Soul Stealer does drop. Does he even have the Cloak of Isha? I'm not sure. He does. So he is taking very little damage, but overall, the Wood Elves are definitely in for a pretty rough time. In this battle, it looks like Marathi will be finishing off the Sisters of Twilight and Orion. Definitely a pretty good starting lead for Ice Power here. Looks like going in for another cycle charge on Orion, but I don't really see many ways that the Wood Elves can win it here. And Marathi clearing out the territory, claiming the lands for her own. These northern Chaos Wastes will be hers. And as soon as the Wood Elves tap on out, we will be moving on to the next game. Orion does drop due to the charge of Marathi, and it looks like it should be army losses very soon. At times he was firing down the line of chariots. Can his spear penetrate multiple models? Yeah, so the way the double hit bug works with chariots, for some missiles that can penetrate chariot-sized models, because chariots sort of count as two units, it can actually hit both of them at once, getting in twice as much damage as you might expect. So I'm not sure if Orion's Javelin actually counts for that, but if it does, that would be pretty brutal for the chariots in some situations. Nevertheless, Ice Power getting in a very decisive victory here in this match. The chariots all performing quite well. Same with the Manticores, same with the Dread Knights, and even the Dark Riders. So overall, everyone doing quite well for themselves, and we will be moving on to the next match between Ice Power and Glorious Feeder. All right, so let's go ahead and load on up the build of Glorious Feeder. We go on over here. We are going to see the build. It is going to be... Actually, let me see if I can get a slightly larger version for you guys. It's going to be a greenskin build, but no ordinary greenskin build. It's actually going to be a green skin. Wow, that's blurry. Nevertheless, it's going to be a green skin build using the Crooked Moon, Skarsnik's very own faction. Showing off a ton of goblins, actually. And we'll see how well this does against Ice Power's army. So, we actually do have the ROR pump wagons showing up today. We have two different types of trolls, stone trolls, extremely meta, and river trolls, definitely the opposite of meta. Meanwhile, we also have a lot of squig hoppers, a bunch of goblin archers on wolves, but also goblin wolf riders. Not a particularly strong unit, but they can chase off units. So we'll see how well they actually perform in this game. Meanwhile, the rest of the army, you got some nasty skulkers, some normal goblins, and not a single orc to be seen. Actually, no, exactly a single orc to be seen in the Black Orc Big Boss. So overall, I would say Ice Power definitely has a higher chance to win here, but we will see. We will see indeed. You know, the Goblin Great Shaman, he does actually, if he does have Vindictive Glare, and people are allowed to sub out spells this game, he could very well poke away at Marathi and the Manticores and cause them to rampage. So that could do quite well, not to mention the infantry, with only a little bit of support, will be able to defeat the Dark Elf frontline, and especially those trolls are going to be a little bit of an issue here. I feel like the single entity squad is actually rather powerful for this greenskin build, despite the rest of their army consisting of only goblins. So definitely not going to be an instant loss for the greenskins by any means. And this is another favored matchup for the greenskins too. Alright, so I'm already seeing there is a little bit of hype about the pump wagons. They do perform really well if they're not taking damage. So against elite infantry, they actually will do a lot of damage. But if that elite infantry has any cavalry support, any single entity support, things change pretty crazily. Praying for the pump wagon pick. I hope they do well. That would be a first. The first of many. But for Ice Power, I'm wondering, is he going to change his army at all? There's not a whole ton to really shift around, but potentially he could take Marathi off of her mount. I doubt it though. It looks like he's going for more or less the same style. Indeed, he is. Very much the same style of build. All the abilities and mounts are the same. You guys know it. You love or hate it, it's going to be Manticores, Marathi, some Chariots, Infantry, Dark Riders, and even some Dread Knights to spice things up a bit. But more importantly, for the Greenskins to contest the forces of Ice Power, we're going to see a Goblin Great Shaman, not on a spider, on this tiny little mount, on a tiny little wolf. So, going a little bit more budget this time to fit in more units. We got the Goblin Great Shaman, we got the Goblin Big Boss with debuffs, and we got the Black Orc Big Boss. Definitely a very strong fighter, but Soul Stealers are going to be getting a lot of damage on those forces. We also have pump wagons off in the distance, ROR too. They're going to be shredding down infantry if they don't die immediately, a couple skirmishers, and some trolls to hopefully support the single entity squad. Overall, I think the Manticore Marathi squad may be a little bit stronger here, but it really depends on who gets more support. A lot of green indeed, Jeremy. But is it enough green? There's only one way to find out as we dive on into the match. Right away, the greenskin balance of power. Very much so in their favor. Pretty atypical for what you would usually expect for this matchup, but I guess that's how it plays out. And we'll see, especially these Goblin Wolf Riders too. This is a very, very off-meta pick here, but potentially they could do well. Human Boy saying, I really don't want to face the Dark Elves. Let's go Greenskins. Alright. I think most people don't want to face against Ice Power's Dark Elves, but you may have to if he manages to win this one out. Now the chariots are progressing forwards as is the standard playstyle here. Very nice anti-skirmish element, and they're going to be shooting a few shots at the wolf riders. Now, strangely enough, the wolf riders eating up the ammunition of the scourge runners, almost cost efficient for the greenskins just because of how cheap they are. Some more skirmishers are firing in at the scourge runner chariots, getting in a tiny bit of poke damage, nothing to really write home about though. And immediately the goblin wolf riders on contact with the dark riders are going to be routing off the battlefield. A little bit of an overextension from them, but they are rather cheap and not too important of a unit anyways. They will be routing off the battlefield though without doing too much. Now, the dark riders, will they be able to actually chase them off the battlefield entirely though? It looks like some squig hoppers are moving on in. They will actually get the charge on the dark riders, but the manticore is here to support. And with the manticore support, I think the squig hoppers will be losing this fight, but they do get a pretty nasty buff though. Sneaky stabbing actually going down, and the wolf riders come back in the second quarter of the battlefield to charge into the backs of the dark riders and shift the tide of this engagement into the favor here of the mobility. The wolf riders with the good old bait and switch actually getting in a lot more value than I would have thought. Who would have guessed? Meanwhile, the manticore still at very high HP, and the wolf riders, as is the way of the goblin, they will be disengaging and running off again, not able to chase off the dark riders. Meanwhile, the greenskin forces are going to be moving forwards, looking to be taking the melee engagement for against ice power, but he's pulling back so that his chariots can get more value. They're killing off these squig hoppers, getting in a really nice damage, but the greenskin forces are advancing. Bubba's Big Blast here in chat, welcome, saying that makes you wonder if wolf riders were bait. Possibly, they definitely did that task. A vindictive glare does drop on the feral manticore too, and it looks like the greenskins are trying to get them to rampage in. Meanwhile, so the explosions from the Logie Bogie Loons gonna be knocking down some bleak swords, not actually getting in that much damage unfortunately, and they're gonna be dying almost immediately to the scourge runners. So very unfortunate fate for a very expensive unit, but looks like they're gonna be getting finished off, and unfortunately that will be the end of them. Meanwhile, Marathi, sensing a good engagement here, landing amongst these stone trolls. Now this can be pretty risky. The stone troll surround could devastate Marathi. Soul Stealer does drop, and it looks like Ice Power is going to be committing to this engagement. He does have his Cold One Dread Knights at the ready. They will be charging in, getting in a really nice amount of damage on the stone trolls, but the other single entities have moved in. The Black Orc Big Boss is wailing away on Marathi, and despite our healing, she's taking a lot of damage. The Fanatics drop, and the Dread Knights take a ton of damage, even a bit of friendly fire from the Doom Bolt. And look at that, the immune to psychology, keeping the stone trolls in the battlefield. Get back here, being fucked, and Marathi actually getting beaten down by the Black Orc Big Boss. She's on the run, and oh my gosh, if she gets chased off by wolf riders, that would be absolutely insane, and it doesn't matter, Marathi actually goes down. A devastating, absolutely devastating engagement there. The stone trolls getting hit with tons of leadership buffs, keeping Marathi in the fight just long enough to kill her off. Absolutely, very, very surgical play for the greenskins there. Had the stone trolls routed off, it would have been a completely different situation. But just like that, the battle is over. Oh my gosh. Marathi getting absolutely just stomped into the ground by the Black Orc Big Boss, getting in a solid 1500 gold value. What an absolute beast that game, but you gotta hand it to those stone trolls actually managing to stay on the battlefield despite the manticores, and we just won't talk about the pump wagons. Now, moving on, it's gonna be Human Boy. So, yeah, he's saying that he has a lobby up, so let's go ahead and join on in and see how things are gonna play out. Let's see here. Where is it? What is it? Moose versus Tank? Oh, here we go. Eltharian Shades versus Human Boy. Let's go ahead and move on into Spectate and see what builds these two players have to show for us today. Human Boy playing more than just Skaven, actually playing Clan Ashen, up against Eltharion Shades. Now, Eltharion Shades, he does have a pretty nice Chaos army here. Apologies for the very small size. It's going to be extremely blurry here. But if you squint real hard, you're going to see... God, that picture is just the... It's just the worst, isn't it? But look, maybe if I shrink it, it'll be a bit better. If you squint really hard, it's going to be a lot of skirmishers, a lot of Chosen, and Sigvald. A pretty scary army indeed for Human Boy. Ready for Human Boy. He's going to be coming on in with a huge Skaven front line, some Jezzails, some Poison Wind, Rat Ogres. It's a very standard defensive Skaven formation. It's a very strong build, but we'll see how it goes. Ice Power in chat saying the Marathi loss was embarrassing. Well, honestly, it would have been a good engagement had the Black Orc Big Boss not had the plus 16 leadership buff. The Trolls actually would have routed. It was because of that single ability that they managed to stay as long as they did. So I wouldn't beat you up, or I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it, but if you want to, I'm not stopping you. Now, let's see how this goes. Indeed. Sometimes the orcs just orc. A little bit of crumping here and there. You just can't stop them. Now, I need to go ahead and change this to Human Boy. By the way, for those of you that don't know, Human Boy does stream a lot of Warhammer content. So if you're interested in a lot of community focused stuff, do check him out. Eltharion Shades, there we go. But for today, Human Boy is going to be playing. And on the left side, for the yellow player, we are seeing a Clan Eshin build without the Clan Eshin Master. Instead, it's just going to be a Grey Seer of Ruin coming in on a bell. Meanwhile, there's a Plague Priest also on a Glorious Bell, and an Assassin on foot on the ground there. It's going to be a ton of Skaven infantry to defend, some Rat Ogres also to defend, and some guns, plus the Zap cannon. The reason people spend the money for this ROR is because of this effect. The Zap effect, plus 10 ability recharge, very annoying when you're focusing down casters, and quite accurate too because of those chevrons. Now the guns are going to be Jezzails, the front line has some Globadiers. It's a very standard Skaven defensive box, but for Chaos, we're going to be seeing a lot of Skirmishers. Really nice in a kite situation, perhaps not as good against the Skaven here. We have Sigvald coming in with just his armor and nothing else. A Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows with just Pit of Shades. Wow, that is quite the pick. Not even just nothing else, only Pit of Shades. Really good for taking out any blobs that form up. And we'll see how well it does against the forces of the Skaven. Meanwhile, the front line, as you saw in the very blurry image earlier, a bunch of Chaos Warrior great weapons, but more importantly, the Chosen. Now, interesting thing about the Chosen, they actually have an insane amount of HP per model. This means that the Globadiers are actually going to be getting in less damage than you might expect against them. And they will actually be able to push on into the Skaven backlines. We saw a game recently in a separate tournament where Chosen did manage to push through the Poison Wind. But will we see them do the same thing this time around? We have yet to figure out. That's right, 2 bells! What a mad lad! Is that how I said it? Human Boy streams a lot of Warhammer content. Oh my gosh! Well, you know, if you donate to his streams, you'll be getting a lot of that content. Yes. But actually, before we get Human Boy banned from YouTube, it is normal Warhammer tournament content. Nothing eyebrow raising about that. Now, at the start of the battle, the Warp Lightning Cannon firing in at the Chosen, very good target to be picking off here. Already killing off 15 models, essentially killing cavalry here. Really, really nice for that piece of for that artillery piece. But what else? What else will it be doing this game? Will it be only shooting at the Chosen? Possibly. as that is a very good choice, as the Chosen are sort of side-facing right now, so we'll be picking off more models. Meanwhile, the Jezzails picking off a couple of Marauder Horsemen, and I think the Skaven have a pretty nice lead here at the start. Not taking the Master Assassin, it is outrageous. Unfair indeed, but Human Boy not playing fair today. He's tryharding with the Clan Eshin army. And honestly, with these single build tournaments, you know, if you're not using the Legendary Lords, using the sub-factions is just a really nice, fun thing to mix in. But honestly, right now, the Chaos are taking heavy losses at the start of the battle. It looks like a Clan Rat Summon is being dropped too, to begin pressuring the forces of Chaos, and the Globadiers are beginning to fire. Now, they do get a lot of good initial damage, but these guys are just Chaos Marauders. They aren't too worried about taking a lot of damage early on, and a Pit of Shades actually dropping in on the Globadiers. This will stun them, stopping them from getting any shots, but it won't actually, it will bring them down to about half HP. Not killing any of the models though, which can get a little bit dicey for Chaos. As Pit of Shades ends, the Globadiers will be able to fire again, and now it looks like they're going to be hitting the Mirror Guard, a much more expensive unit for Chaos. Meanwhile, in the back, it looks like the Marauder Horsemen, they do slam into the Warp Lightning Cannon. They are getting in a ton of value, but they will have to rout it off. Human Boy not noticing this. His Rat Ogres idling on the flanks, watching as the Warp Lightning Cannon falls. The Marauder Horsemen push on forwards, but the damage is done. The Warp Lightning Cannon is down. Meanwhile, a full HP unit of Chosen on the flank are beginning to advance, and they will start to cause some issues for the Skaven, unless the Poison Wind Globadiers manage to stay safe. And right now it looks like that is going to be the case as they reposition closer to the center of the formation, falling back to a more defensive position, and now possibly firing in at the Marauder Horsemen, who have shut down the Jezzails. Meanwhile, the Chosen have engaged. That means that the Skaven are on a timer, and they will eventually push through, but the Horsemen are off and disengaging now, and the Globadiers are still fairly safe. Looks like they might get another volley off on the Mirror Guard, but before they do, the Mirror Guard are already off the battlefield and instead targeting Sigvald. Now, this is going to be hitting a lot of the Clan Rat Spears. This is a little bit of a misplay for the Skaven, and another Pit of Shades is going to be dropping on the Warplock Jezzails, catching them. And if it does the same amount of damage as it did to the Globadiers, some of these Jezzails will probably be losing a few models. Meanwhile, Marauder Horsemen pushing in through the back, shutting down the Warp Lightning Cannon again. And the very elite Chosen are collapsing in onto the Skaven backline. One of the units already routing off, but another one, Skaven, ever the numerous faction, do manage to pin down the Chosen again with another unit. But the front line of Chaos is beginning to buckle. Even though the Chaos Warrior Great Weapons are doing good, they are just doing good. Rat Ogres move in to intercept, but they are one unit away from finally shutting down these Globadiers. The Globadiers are still firing them, though, in fact, both still are. And the Warp Lightning Cannon, despite all odds, is once again back up on the battlefield. Dreaded 13th spell drops, routing off the Chaos Warrior Great Weapons, but the Chosen finally collapse in on the back lines of the Skaven here. This could be a huge comeback for the forces of Chaos. Meanwhile, Sigvald doing pretty well for himself. He's taken a bit of damage, but he's dealt a good amount back. It really depends on whether or not he dies to this assassin, though. Sigvald is weaker against units with very high melee attack, and another Pit of Shades is dropping on the Globadiers. But does it really matter? Maybe a bit, because this unit of Chosen really doesn't want to be taking Globadier fire. Meanwhile, this other unit of Chosen, they are collapsing in. They're hitting the Globadiers now and shutting them down. Finally, the Bane of the Chaos now getting collapsed in on. Meanwhile, the other unit of Globadiers, it looks like a couple unit of Chosen have managed to disrupt them too. But it really depends on how well this unit of infantry does without support. There are two bells here, one of which is a Mortis engine, so the Chosen will be taking a lot of damage. It's going to be pretty scary indeed. Sigvald, meanwhile, looks like he's been taking a lot of damage himself, getting caught up in the Rat Ogres and getting debuffed by that assassin, making him a lot less of a threat than he usually is. Meanwhile, Chosen on the center line, actually Chaos Warriors, getting beat up pretty hard. They are down to 33 models, but only a tiny sliver of HP. Another Globadier volley will be chunking them down, and it looks like they may be completely annihilated here in just a second. They rout off just looking at that screaming bell. And it looks like it's just gonna be Sigvald left, his chosen, although they did manage to finally collapse in on the back line. They're finding a lot of really bad matchups now. They're fighting against Rat Ogres, against the Bells, and although the Poison Wind Globadiers are going down, the balance of power is very much in the favor of the Skaven. And unless Sigvald manages to pull out a miracle here, I think Human Boy will be taking the victory and going up against Ice Power in the finals. Sigvald now routing off the battlefield, and that's gonna be it. Another game finished. Which means today we have reached the finals of the tournament rather quickly. As is expected with a single build tournament, they generally go a lot faster than you might expect. So if you see over here, the final match is going to be played on the Northern Chaos Wastes. Wow, that's a huge image. Let's go ahead and shrink that up just a tiny bit. There we go. On the Northern Chaos Wastes, it's going to be Human Boy against Glorious Beater. All right. You can invite Beater to this lobby. So there we go. Letting the players know. And I am pretty excited to see how this goes. The Greenskin army is actually pretty formidable against the Skaven army. I think both sides actually have a pretty decent... Yes. Beater. I think both sides actually have a pretty decent chance of taking the win this time around. But if you guys have any... Yeah, specifically not you, Ice Power. Sorry, I'm rubbing salt in the wound just a little bit. Not Ice Power. It's gonna be Glorious Beater. Sorry, I'm so used to Ice Power winning my tournaments. I just default to him being in the finals every time now. But this time you will not be walking away with the prize, Ice Power. But like what, you won like more than 10 of my tournaments at this point. It's crazy, man. All right, who will win? Skaven or the Green Boys? All right. So here we go. Let's go ahead and do a poll. I'm interested to see how you guys think this will play out. We've seen both armies played in the tournament so far. We know exactly what to expect from both forces. But who do you think will win? The map is going to be the Northern Chaos Wastes. A map that is not as good for that Warp Lightning Cannon as other maps. Although it is quite large, Skaven will have to deploy very far forwards to get a good shooting position. Arid Zephyr donating in chat too. Thank you very much. Saying, I think the cheapest army tournament would be fun. A top player plays the same build known to all, and the person who beats him with the cheapest army wins. Wow, okay. That would be pretty interesting. We might try that out in the future. There is a system to actually propose these types of bonus tournaments. So if we need ideas, I might actually pull from that. That's pretty sick. But thank you very much for the donation, Arid Zephyr. Hopefully we'll be able to showcase that one day. And as we close the poll, we're going to be seeing most of the votes, 69% of the votes going for Skaven. Very nice, people. I'm happy that my chat are a people of culture, it seems. Now for the Skaven, it looks like they're going to be deploying. Oh yeah. It's actually part of the Patreon system. But I do take into account people's people's just suggestions in general. So you don't have to be part of the Patreon to actually suggest tournament ideas. But yeah, anyways, I will show it off at the end of the video, but not right now because I can only plug myself so much before it becomes too much. In fact, it might already be too much. But nevertheless, we have an army to go over. You know it, you love it. It's a Skaven defensive formation. Artillery in the back looks like he's going to be trying to keep that safe now with Skaven's slave. No, Clan Rat spears defending them, not falling to the same follies as before. Meanwhile, the Greenskins going for a vanguard position. The Wolf Rats, just kidding, the Wolf Riders in the back are going to be looking for opportunities to dive on in. But this time around, the Skaven position is a little bit tighter. It seems like there won't be many opportunities until the battle has got on for a bit. Meanwhile, over here, looks like the Skirmishers playing pretty far back, and the Greenskins are advancing. Rat Riders. Ooh, that'd be pretty fun. And right off the bat, the Goblin Wolf Riders getting a hail of bullets from the Jezzails. Gonna be beat up pretty hard this time around. Oh, Rusty. Welcome in chat. Apologies for not locking in and turning up today. Yeah, no problem, no problem. You're not obligated to play in tournaments. You feel free to sign up and not play it. It sort of manages itself. But the Wolf Riders, they're going to be off the battlefield. It looks like the Rat Ogre is actually chasing them off in completion. And that's going to be the end of those poor Wolf Riders over there. Meanwhile, the other ones, cowering in fear, deciding not to advance, as they really just do not want to get gunned down the same way as the last unit. But perhaps building a bit of courage, they do move out of the forest as the Jezzails are targeting a different unit. The Wolf Rider Archers taking quite a bit of damage, but they haven't routed yet, and they're going to be a bit of a threat to these Rat Ogres here. It's going to take a while for the Jezzails to actually take them down. And meanwhile, just a little bit of dancing with the cavalry while the rest of the Greenskin forces engage. Sleep is for the living indeed. And there we go. One of the Wolf Riders does rout off. Now, that's just going to be a little bit of skirmishing. Not a lot of gold actually getting committed there. And much more importantly, this frontline fight. The River Trolls are taking a lot of damage from the Warp Lightning Cannon. The Trolls are going to be slamming in, taking a lot of heat. And oh my gosh! The River Trolls getting absolutely demolished by that Warp Lightning Cannon. Huge volleys coming in onto them, the Jezzails focusing them down, and they're going to be running for the hills. Only 7 models of them left. I'd be running too if I were them, but the Stone Trolls are going to be a lot scarier. The Skaven Assassin is doing his best to hold the line there, but we'll see if he can manage it. Meanwhile, the Pump Wagons hanging in the back line, potentially a laking situation, and a huge debuff coming down, the Itchy Nuisance. Gonna be making things very hard for anything here to actually land any hits. Meanwhile, the Stone Trolls move on up. They're going to be engaging against the Rat Ogres, but the Rat Ogres have Itchy Nuisance on them too. Black Orc Big Boss looks like he's going to be moving on in to engage too, and he's choosing to pick the fight with the Assassin, but he's lying on the floor. He doesn't take the hit from the Black Orc Big Boss, but finally as he loops around, it's going to be a fight. Black Orc Big Boss using his leadership buffs, but he's not there to support the Stone Trolls. They do get hit with the wall though, and that means that they won't be terror routing. Huge Fanatic Bomb on the Rat Ogres too, gonna be really nice. And the Skaven backline is beginning to collapse a bit. A lot of their range units aren't firing. And the Black Orc Big Boss is still hunting down that Skaven Assassin. Neither unit really getting in a lot of damage, but the Stone Trolls, ever the very scary unit, managed to rout off 4 units of Skaven. Squig Hoppers 2 on the flanks could actually run them down, but instead they choose to shut down the Warplock Jezzails that are still in the fight. Black Bork Big Boss still at very high HP, gonna be fighting the Bells now, and it's gonna be the 2 assassins fighting against each other. The Goblin Big Boss with the Slippery debuffing, nope, not debuffing the Skaven Assassin. Both of their debuffs are on cooldown right now, and they're just going to be dueling it out. Meanwhile, in the back line, it looks like the Greenskins are faring quite well. And the Goblin Great Shaman is still very good on HP. He doesn't have to worry at all about getting sniped, and that's a really nice saving grace for the Greenskins. It looks like, despite all odds, the Goblin Big Boss actually shutting down the Assassin pretty hard. And despite the attempts of the Warp Lightning Cannon to assist, it actually gets more friendly fire on that Assassin than damage on the Big Boss. Meanwhile, Logie Bogie Spore Splodas doing some very nice, effects on the side of the map, but not actually having too much impact. And the Skaven lines have mostly collapsed, but surprisingly enough, they managed to rally in a large group all at once over here. And this could potentially be a nice comeback situation for them. The Stone Trolls have rounded off, and the Black Orc Big Boss We'll see if he can actually kill off 2 bells here. He's a really strong fighter. But he will go down eventually due to the fact that he simply does not have a ton of healing. He's been taking a good amount of damage himself, but the Night Goblin RORs are here to support. They could potentially throw down another Fanatic Bomb, and if they do, that could absolutely devastate the Skaven forces over here. Meanwhile, the Globadier is getting shut down by these Squig Hoppers. They won't be getting in much value. And it looks like it's just gonna come down to the bells. The Black Orc Big Boss still at decent HP, but there are Rat Ogres here to support. And the Spore Splodas are moving on in. They're hit with the leadership buff. And potentially they may even do some damage, but that has yet to be seen. Greenskins, it looks like, oh my goodness, another Wah getting procced. Second one in the battlefield, quite impactful too, as it will be buffing up the Black Orc Big Boss and the Stone Trolls. They've rallied and are charging in. They're at high leadership, and they're going to be getting in a lot of damage on this Grace here. Another Itchy Nuisance. Really nice spell usage here for the Greenskins this tournament. Gonna be really securing some very decisive fights here. And the 2 bells ringing as hard as they can, not able to keep the Skaven forces in the battlefield. But there are a unit of Storm Vermin Halberds that have dropped. They could potentially pull things back together. They're anti-large, chopping down the Stone Trolls. A Black Orc Big Boss losing to the Skaven Assassin, getting hit by the Assassin's Trophy. If he goes down, the Greenskins might just suffer a constant terror rout in the late stages of the game. Despite the balance of power being so favored for the Greenskins, it could very well go that way. We'll see if that's what actually happens here. I would not count the Skaven out just yet. You can see lots of terror routes going down, and the Black Orc Big Boss just barely clinging onto the battlefield. There's an assassin too. He'll be able to snipe out the heroes. And oh my gosh, the Black Orc Big Boss. No, he manages to disengage. The hero, the Goblin Great Shaman, actually moving into combat, will take a hit from the assassin, but he saves the Black Orc Big Boss so that he can kill off the bells. As for the Greenskins, there are nasty Skulkers off in the distance. They will be quite dangerous against the bells, since they do have their slow and armor-piercing hits. And Bob, he finds contact with the Grey Seer of Ruin. He's getting in decent damage, but he takes a lot of damage back. The assassin lands a hit. And although a spell does hit the Grey Seer, it looks like Bob is going to be running for the hills. The assassin missing his parting shot. That means that Bob might even come back in the later stages of the game. And once again, the Stone Trolls are back in action. They've regenerated a bit. They've steeled their will. And it looks like they're ready to take another fight. Meanwhile, Squig Hopper's getting finished off by Rat Ogres in the distance. Skirmishers running out of ammunition, so it's gonna be a melee grind for the Skaven to win it. And the Stone Trolls, on contact, look like they're having a pretty rough day. And they rout off again, not shattered, but they're definitely gonna be losing some models here on the disengage. Black Orc Big Boss trying to move into support, but he gets hit by another Assassin's Trophy. Definitely doesn't want to be taking the fight just yet, but it looks like time is of the essence. He moves in for the killing blow, charges into the Plague Priest. Oh my goodness, he barely finishes off the Skaven Lord, and just like that, they get pushed into army losses. Oh my goodness. Honestly, the Skaven might have won it if they hadn't hit army losses there. But by keeping that Goblin Great Shaman at such high HP for the whole game, Glorious Feeder manages to push the Skaven into army losses there. And despite the absolutely insane value on all of the heroes here, I think the Greenskins, they just barely managed to do it. Really nice shutting down of the Globadiers too. And even though the Warp Lightning Cannon got a lot of damage, eventually the Greenskins managed to pull out ahead. And once again, despite using the pump wagons, the Greenskins managed to pull through. Stone Trolls, absolutely amazing unit. River Trolls, garbage. You can see why people don't run these guys. Instead, use Stone Trolls, guys. Use Squig Hoppers. Don't use Wolf Riders. You know, I think Glorious Feeder here was really just trying to show us... He was just trying to show us which units in the Greenskin roster are good and which ones are bad, you know? Goblin Big Boss costs half as much as Black Orc Big Boss, gets almost the same amount of value. Fanatics, absolutely amazing unit. And I think my game just crashed, guys. So I guess that's where we end the stream. So, yeah, you legit think you had that, but the balance of power was pretty brutal indeed. Human boy, it was pretty brutal indeed. Now, the stream, we will be closing it out. Thank you very much, guys, for coming in to watch. I would like to announce too, by the way, I have a membership program on my channel now for only $10 US. You can support the channel and get analysis on your replays, so check that out if you're interested. Meanwhile, I do also have a Patreon for the latter, which is very well linked to these tournaments. And special thanks to all the patrons that allow me to host these tournaments. Red Wedding Planner specifically for letting me host this tournament. And of course, for general support, Red Wedding Planner, Romacarol, Barney Arquette, AC Maiden, Biblington, and J Phoenix. You guys are absolutely amazing. And of course, Arid Zephyr too for supporting the channel today. Thank you to everyone, and I hope to see you next time. And look at that, the game crashes right on cue.